Hey there! Welcome back to Business as Unusual. Today we're chatting with Ren Rice, the passionate founder of Romance Era Bookstore in Vancouver, Washington. From their unique journey into the world of books to running amazing community events, Ren's got some awesome stories and insights to share. Stick around.
Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Welcome to Business as Unusual. I am very excited to be here today with Ren Rice. They are the founder and owner of the Romance Era Bookstore in Vancouver, Washington. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. What made you decide to open a Romance Era? I mean, I love it. As I said, I hope we talk about Bridgerton, but what made you decide to open that in Vancouver of all places?
Yeah. I feel like I tell this story so often that it's like kind of ingrained in my elevator pitch, but basically I was always a reader. I'm an only child, so books and movies were pretty much my go-to. And I knew at a really young age that I would either work in books or I would work in film. I didn't have like the goal like most kids usually have of like, a lot of my friends are like, oh, to be a teacher, I want to be, a ballet dancer. I'm just like, I just want to work with books or I want to work in movies because my mom encouraged both.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, I fell out of love with reading like most people do when you have to read it, like when you're forced to read. And so I pivoted and I actually did work in film for about 3 years as a costumer because my background actually is in apparel. And then in 2020, like most people during the lockdown, I picked up reading as a hobby because what else are we supposed to do? We couldn't leave our houses and I worked from home and it just became a place where it's like, well, I might as well catch up on all the books that I kind of missed over the years. And I actually started with a lot of fiction centered around like dark academia, which is like another genre of book that I do enjoy. As someone who loves school and learning, books centered around people that are in an academic setting that go through whatever trials and tribulations, be it like magical, horror related, really resonated with me. But I am a huge Star Wars fan. And so right after The Force Awakens came out, I started reading a lot of Star Wars fan fiction online. And a lot of that is romance. It was centered around Kylo Ren and Rey and romance. And no matter like what world you plopped them into, be it space or our modern day, they were always in love. And so I like devoured that like crazy. And my friend was like, oh, there's like books that you can read that have these same romantic tropes. And I was like, oh, because to me, romance was bodice rippers. It was the covers with like the shirtless guy and the girl, and they were like, mass market size. I don't know why my brain didn't even like understand that there were romance books beyond that. But once I found that, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it just kind of became my like obsession, was just like buying and reading romance. And I ended up moving to Vancouver in 2021, I think. I always lose track because everything kind of happened really quickly. But yeah, moved here on a whim pretty much because I lived in California my whole life. And I was like, well, if this is the new normal, I would rather experience this new normal in a new place instead of the same thing I've been for the rest of my whole life. I had only moved out of California a handful of times, but that was because military. It wasn't because I wanted to. And so I came to visit a friend, and I was like, hey, I put in some touring appointments for some apartments. Can we go look at them? And she was like, yeah. And I signed like 2 leases during that trip and ended up moving here a month later and got some jobs. And then I started therapy, and my therapist and I were on the topic of goals. And I had mentioned like my retirement goal is to open a bookstore. And that sort of spiraled into this conversation about like why it's not generally a good idea to wait until retirement to like do the thing you want to do, because that's just an excuse most people have to like not do it, and how there's never going to be a right time and that you just kind of have to go for it. And I was like, I hear you. All right. So that I just did it. And this was in, when did I start doing this? So I've been a retail space since October of last year, but technically I've been a business since November of 2022. And I started in January of last year doing markets. So I basically would go find books, throw them in bins, and carry all those bins to marketplaces and just sell at booths. And people always ask like, oh, do you have a physical store? And I'm like, no, because at the time I was working in my field, I was working in apparel, and I was comfortable with that. And I didn't want to put all my eggs in the basket of renting a retail space just yet. And so I was like, eventually. And it just so happened that I was at a birthday party, and some people were there, and they were like, hey, we just taught a really cool class at this warehouse space. You should go check it out. And I did. And I reached out and was like, hey, would you be interested in having a retail space there? And she was like, yeah. And so basically I got a retail spot in July, and then I opened in October, and then I have been a retail space since, and I actually just moved location. So I just reopened last month after being closed for a month, like moving spaces. So I went from a really small room in a warehouse on a second floor on a street that no one could find, and it was like a secret, almost like if you know, to being on a ground level in a shopping center next to a coffee shop. And just this first month being reopened, I've had way more foot traffic and way more business. So because of that, I actually quit my job. So I just quit last month to decide to run the space full time, because I realized that it was picking up and people wanted more things that I know I could do. I just couldn't have the time because I was working 3 days at my job, off one day, and then 3 days at the store. So I was like, why not?
Well, it is becoming, retail season, if you will. So that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And I was like, holiday season, I was already bummed because I missed essentially summer. So I wasn't open when people were back from college, that's that whole thing. So because I missed out on that season, I was like, I don't want to miss out on holiday season. So quitting and doing it full-time. Yeah. And I actually start my full-time schedule tomorrow.
Wow, congratulations. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you so much.
So I have to ask, are you going to have apparel in your store?
Yeah, so
Okay, good. Needed that answer.
Yeah. I had like tote bags in the beginning, and I had a couple of shirts because my job actually donated a bunch of clothes, and they were like, hey, congratulations, we're going to donate clothes for you to have them screen printed. So I had like a small batch of clothes from them, and I actually just picked up my first shirt order yesterday from the same printer. So I'm going to do small runs just because I don't really have the space in the shop for clothing specifically. So like I figure if I do small runs, People, they'll get them and then I'll just make more and they'll just be like a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah. I love that. So you're specializing in a specific niche of books. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that's working. What is the response? Like, people come in and are they confused by that? Or are they like excited? Or because it sounds like you have foot traffic. People are also coming in without necessarily having sought you out. So how does that conversation go?
Well, there's a giant sign in the window that says the Romance Era. So I think people know before coming in that it is romance something, but I still get is this like a romance only bookstore? And I have to say, yeah, it is. And explain my business model, which is a little confusing sometimes to people because they come in and they expect new books, but I opted to go the used book route. And then, of course, I always say it's a safe space that is sex, pleasure, and body positive, because I've met a lot of people who through romance have explored more their sexuality and more of the sexual aspects. And I feel like that kind of goes hand in hand with books, the romance genre sometimes. So in order to showcase that, hey, this space, when you walk through these doors, you are safe here and you can talk to me about anything. We can talk about whatever to find the books that you like. I do have a lot of artwork and things on the wall that are considered 18 plus. And so I also have to have like a sign on the door that's like, hey, if you're under 18, please have your parent, because I don't want to be responsible for like, kids seeing things that they probably shouldn't. But it for the most part is people that have sought me out for one reason or another, either through word of mouth or they saw me on socials. A lot of my foot traffic right now comes from people who saw me on Instagram because I'm pretty active on there, and then a couple on TikTok because I'm trying to get better at using that as a platform. But yeah, romance is one of the most selling genres right now, so I think a lot of people are seeking out these specific niche stores.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, I used to run 2 different LGBTQ plus community centers, one actually up in Tacoma, Washington. And I just know from my years of doing that those stories are really important and those spaces are really important. I mean, I just remember when I came out, Tanya Huff's Sing the Four Quarters books were coming out. And I was like, oh, okay. It just seeing yourself in that is such a powerful way to de-isolate. It's what you were talking about. I was also an only child, but I think even if you're not, my friend was not an only child, but she was in a very conservative family, and books were the way that she felt like there was another aspect of possibility for her. And I feel like that it's weird because the internet in some ways can decrease isolation, but I feel like in other ways it increases engagement, but not connection. And it's weird that a book can increase a feeling of being seen and connected to, maybe because it stimulates empathy. I haven't really thought about it until this conversation, because I'm like, I felt way more connected when I was just reading.
Yeah.
Oddly enough. So at any rate, that's a very long-winded way to say, I really think it's neat that you're providing that, because in addition to it obviously being a passion for you, I think there is really a space for a need for that, for people to feel like they can find things that help them to feel some sense of safety in that area. Right. And also, honestly, joy, right? We want more than safety. We want joy as well. So.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I'm very loud about myself as the business owner. That's why on all socials and all descriptions, I make sure to emphasize Black and queer. I have the pride flag and the lesbian flag in the window because that's what I identify as. I want people to know before they come in what they're getting into. And I feel like that has definitely stopped the wrong people from coming in. And I think that because of that and the environment that I've curated thus far, a lot more people feel comfortable coming in because they know, like, okay, well, if someone, ideally in Vancouver, I haven't had this issue yet, but Vancouver is still pretty not diverse in terms of BIPOC communities, but it's like, if they're able to stop this at the door, which I will do that if I have to. I think people are more inclined to come in because they know that I personally won't take shit, because I'm very loud about what it is that you're getting into when you walk in here. And I've also put on socials before, especially with events where I'm trying to curate and provide a safe space, because like I do have events, like I just did on Saturday, an 18 plus event where the vendors that came in were former and current sex workers that created businesses that sell product to basically promote that. And so like one of them sells adult jewelry, and I was like, hey, if you're not into seeing any of this stuff, just don't come in today, it's not your day. But
it's not your day.
Come next week. But if you do come in and you decide to be rude, I won't hesitate to remove you from the space. Like I will do that, because I don't want people to feel judged for coming in and wanting to find a local artist that makes things that they're interested in exploring. And so, yeah.
What does success look like to you? I mean, it feels like you're you're probably on that trajectory. You get to quit your job, but is there anything else that speaks to you in that way?
I feel like as long as I am able to provide for my community, which has always been like, obviously you want to make money, and I understand that. And given that I quit my job, I have to. So obviously being sustainable financially will show a sign of success for me. But I also want to be able to keep providing for the community, keep uplifting local businesses, because their success is my success and vice versa. If we can keep the economy in Vancouver in this cycle of I help you, you help me, and I bring customers to you, you bring customers to me in any way, in any capacity, then we're all winning. And so, I mean, my main goal, other than being able to provide for myself, is to make sure that I'm not just sequestering myself and becoming successful alone. I want everyone to be successful. And if, like, for example, my business model is used books, but I also carry indie authors on consignment, because indie authors have a hard time getting into bookstores because they are self-published or they're not linked up with any wholesaler. So they don't make as much money as a traditionally published author. So I was like, hey, let's get your book in store. You'll get 60% of your sales, and I'll keep pushing you. And my payout for all indie authors in the first month of being open was almost $2,000, which I think is great. That helps.
Yeah, that is really great.
Yeah. And when I have indie authors that people maybe can't find or get access to, that shows the sign of success for me, because they're coming in and they're shopping and they're not just buying that book, but they're buying other things. And then they're supporting this author, but they're also supporting keeping my doors open. And so long story short, I get really winded and stuff, but I just want to make sure that, obviously money, but I'm keeping everyone in my circles successful too. And I think if I can keep doing that and we can keep doing that together, then we'll all be successful and it'll be fine.
No, I'm here for it. I think that's part of my whole, honestly, the whole point of the podcast and a lot of the work that I do is coming from the nonprofit world. In my own, I would say, prejudices, I had a certain feeling about the concept of business. And I actually recently talked about it on my Instagram and TikTok, that I went to Climate Week in Amsterdam actually 2 years ago, and there was a woman there who said something that just really hit me, which was that we need business models to fight business models. Right now, we have one business model that gets all the amplification, and it is extractive capitalism. Mm-hmm. And really and truly, most of us aren't into it. Most of us care about the community. We care about the planet. We want to spend time with our families. We don't want to just work all the time. I mean, I do like to work, but I will stop because I like to hang out with my family and my friends. And the model that we're fed is completely opposite of that. It's very inhumane. And so I was like, oh, actually, we, as people that care about community and care about social justice and care about the environment, we need to actually do the opposite and get more involved in talking about business models and the ways in which we can use business as a tool for building community and connection and making things better. Because the reality is that I have met, through doing this podcast and just through being more open to it, so many people who have a business model, so many different ones too, because they're not trying to be some big conglomerate.
Right.
They're trying to do something that functions in their community and for their life, exactly what you're talking about. They're making up something. And of course, yeah, they pay their bills, they want to have some money in savings. People go to the extreme of saying, oh, it's not, you just don't want to make, no, of course we want to make a living, but that's what we want, is to make a living. And then we want to live
exactly
in that living. Yeah. And that's the part that gets left out sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely subscribe to the collaboration over competition, especially in the book industry. And there's been like a massive uptick in romance bookstores. I'm not saying like I'm the first, obviously. I got inspired to do romance based off of a romance bookstore in California because I didn't think you could just have a niche bookstore. And I'm like, duh, of course you can. So like I saw them doing it and I was like, well, that makes sense. Like I can just bring that here. And I prefer to partner with people of a similar business model as me instead of holding all the resources to myself, because why can't we all just work together? We're all doing the same thing. And it helps that like, yeah, I'm a used indie and this one over here is like a new. We already have two different things. I'm not stepping on their toes being new and they're not stepping on mine being used or indies. Why can't we just come together and do stuff? And so I usually try to reach out to places like that to say, hey, let's work together on something. Or if I find a new cool spot in Vancouver that I'm like really interested in, I'm like, hey, would you be interested in partnering with me on an event or something? Or if it's an artist, it's like, hey, come set up a table in my store for the day. Like, I'm not going to charge you and you can keep all your sales. I just want you to be able to have an outlet to sell your stuff. A new batch of people. Yeah. And people are always like, well, how do you make money from that? And it's like, just people walking in the door. Like, I'm not trying to make money off of this person or sell tickets. If I advertise well enough, that's really cool things happening in the store. People are going to come in, check it out, and then also check out the store. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. The win-win-win is my favorite. Yeah. And exactly. Not everything has to be a direct sale or / benefit. And I think that's also something that I've seen, that some folks have that, how do I say, that balance between individual and communal needs. And so saying, this may not directly benefit me, it does benefit my community, and anything that benefits my community, I know I also benefit from. And in terms of it benefits this artist, and maybe it brings people in and you get sales, and maybe that day it doesn't, but it's still anything that's benefiting the community, it will come back to you. Right. And it's hard sometimes when people, and I get you have to have a balance of it too. If you overcorrect and you only do things that are communal, you'll go out of business and then we don't get to enjoy the store. So you have to find that balance, right? And I'm super here for it. That feels like, I wish that were the default. I'll just leave it there. I look forward to it being the default. How's that?
Yeah. And to piggyback off that, like you said, I don't only do that. There are things that I do where it's like, yeah, you have to pay to get in to do this thing. Like I'm showing Pride and Prejudice this month at the space that I co-run with my friends. And it's like, yeah, come hang out and watch like one of my favorite romance movies, but you get to like have a dining experience. There's going to be charcuterie and drinks and decorated tables, and you don't have to sit in a chair. You're going to sit at a table with your friends and enjoy this movie. And obviously I have to cover my expenses for that. And I think I've learned that people are okay with paying for things. And that was like definitely something I had to learn, because I always thought like, I don't want to price anything too high, or like but in this experience, I've learned that if you put a dollar amount on something and you're breaking down what this gets them, they're like, yeah, okay. They don't even think about it. They're just like, this sounds fun. And so to balance that, of course, it's like, yeah, I thank you for helping me put on this really cool event. And as a thank you, here's like a full month where every Saturday you'll get to come in and see 2 new like shops you've never seen before, and pop-up tattoo artists come support this queer tattoo artist. And it's like there's definitely balance that can be had there. And like you, I wish that was the norm, but it's okay. We'll get there.
But you're making it the norm where you can. Yeah. And that's something I think that is really important, is when people realize that they can use the influence they have to move things in the direction they believe in. Mm-hmm. That is incredibly powerful, because doing that shows people there are possibilities beyond what they've assumed. And it inspires other people to look at the places where they have influence and interest to do things in a way that might be more collaborative or more inclusive. And I definitely believe more in the trickle up theory. And so to me, it feels like if we're going to see a real change, this is how we're going to see it, is so many of us doing what we can instead of some sort of weird superhero showing up and fixing everything. I don't really believe in that, as you could tell by the disdainful way that I described it. So like, I can't even pretend. Can you tell me about advice that you've received that influences the way you approach your work?
Gosh. I mean, I feel like most of my advice has come from my therapist, which is always valuable. I'm definitely someone who I've taken this whole thing on my own. And so I kind of have been learning by my own mistakes, not so much by advice that people have given me, save for my therapist. And so when I told her that I was going to go full time, she just said, make sure that you have balance, because she knows me well enough to know that I will either start going all in and reach that burnout, or I will build up to it, because the way my brain works is like, oh, I could be doing more. So she was like, make sure you have balance. And so instead of working 7 days a week like I was originally going to do, I'm only going to work 5 and have a weekend. That weekend is like midweek, but it's still a weekend. And make sure that I prioritize resting, obviously, but seeing my friends, and like just making sure that I don't isolate myself, because that is something that I very easily can do doing this solo, because like I don't have employees, I don't have a helper, I don't have a partner, I don't have like anyone to really step in to be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't. So I'm kind of like self-monitoring at that point. But I think in order to be successful full-time, I'm going to have to do that, whether I want to or not, because I could just as easily work at the store all day, every day. It's like my favorite thing to do. But given that it was something I avoided for so long, because I know that I'm neurodivergent in the way where like I pick up my hobby and then I get bored with the hobby, I didn't want to get bored with the shop. So in order to not do that, balance is going to have to happen. So I could have just as easily started full-time Monday and worked, whatever, but I gave myself 4 days off. So that's why my full-time will start tomorrow. And I think in doing that, I will be happier and I will be more inclined to, engage a little bit more and not fall into that trap of becoming like a disgruntled worker at my own place of business, which I know can happen.
No, it really can. I also talk about it. Like at some point you probably will have someone who comes in and helps you with books or inventory or something, right? And one of the things that I think is really important to recognize, if you exploit yourself, you'll probably exploit other people. So you need to be really good about not exploiting yourself, because that's this culture that you're going to set. However you treat yourself is the culture you're creating. And I feel like that is really common for solopreneurs, especially passionate solopreneurs. And I absolutely have fallen into this mistake myself. I am not standing outside the ring saying, and it's a really important, and there is something in, it is a little bit different when you work a lot because you love what you're doing. Like it's not as draining by any means. Right. And I have found that when I have very distinct times off to recharge, I just work better. Yeah. And it's not even being tired. It's just that like, it's almost like the break just allows me to come back with that fresh perspective or that different feeling about things. And so I'll segue into like, what do you do to keep yourself inspired or to recharge?
Definitely, obviously reading. I think reading books that I have on my shelves, which I definitely need to make a dent in, is my favorite thing to do, because then I have more books that I can come back to and recommend to people, even though I might not have them in the store. But it's still good to have that Rolodex of books that you can be like, okay, I was looking for this. I don't have it, but like, let me spin the wheel. Oh yeah, I read this recently. And being able to be a resource is always something that makes me happy. And getting inspired by my friends. All of my friends do cool stuff. And so it's really nice to see that all of us in our, we're all millennials, 30 plus, just now buckling down to take ownership of the things that I've always wanted to do. And so, getting inspired by talking to my friend who's an author and like talking about her journey and what she's doing and checking out on her. And then, I have my other friend who just started, she's a bookstagrammer, but she also just started like a personal family account. And I love seeing what her and her family get up to around Vancouver. And I think that's really cool. So it's like, it gets me ideas of like, oh, like I should go out and explore the city that I live in that I really haven't explored in the last 2 years. So being able to like do things and connect and then also read, I think I'm able to, start these work days as like, okay, I did things. Like I wasn't just sequestered in the house. I actually went outside and took a walk or like visited a new store or whatever. But oh yeah, I also finished 2 books this weekend that I can tell people about. So I find joy in that right now. We'll see if that changes, but yeah.
For folks that are listening, what's the best way for them to connect, and what are things that are coming up that you want people to know about?
Yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram. That's the one platform I think I can connect with most people. I'm starting a newsletter, so that's a good one to sign up for if people want to know what's coming up in the month and the next month. So they can sort of keep in mind like, oh, I want to sign up for this. Let me put this on my calendar. And the website, you can order for shipping. So you can place your orders. And now that I will be full-time, I'll be able to like pack things a little bit more quicker and get them out the door, when previously I was only able to do it once a week. But yeah, and then if you're local, I do curbside in-store pickup. You can come in and shop during open hours. And then as for events, gosh, there's so much happening. I mentioned the Pride and Prejudice one, but that one actually sold out, so I don't have any more open spots for that. I will be vending at OMSI After Dark this month for their Books and Brews event. This will be my second time vending with them, and I always have a good time. So if you are going to that, you'll probably see me around. / you should probably go to that because they're really fun. It's nice to like see all the adults have fun in the museum after hours. I have book clubs. I have 2 on the schedule permanently that happen the last Fridays and Saturdays of the month. So you can find information on those online. And right now I'm in the process of solidifying October. So I don't have October stuff like completely solidified yet. But if you sign up for the newsletter or just follow on Instagram, you'll see like all the October events.
That sounds fantastic. Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you want to let people know about, or?
Not that I can think of.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I had a really good time.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend, or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. While we love our guests, appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.